Our case presentation by Taylor Sky, Group 4.
John Harris.
Stephen Wilkie.
Parker Beal.
Emmanuel Olvera.
Okay, the overview on the food industry is that it is consumed by most of the world's population. Food safety and supply chain is directly linked to the food industry and provides the most important aspects, especially in the restaurant chains. Food safety slash hygiene is that it includes the steps to ensure that the customers are being protected from foodborne illnesses by maintaining cleaning habits. And supply chain is important to the food industry because it keeps track of all the material and goods within restaurants.
So Chipotle does a lot of things to implement food safety. They do constant temperature checks. They do inspections. So whenever they're buying a new building or anything, they have to make sure that they get someone to inspect the building, make sure insulations are okay, make sure coolers, freezers are going to be up to temperature. They're going to be able to withstand different temperatures, different varieties of things like animals trying to get in, chewing through insulation and things like that. And then their waste management, making sure that the food from the previous day is thrown out on time, that they're thrown out in proper bins so that they're not cross-contaminated with the bins from the day that they're making fresh food. And another thing that they do is they implement bonus checks for the crew members and for management for following proper safety, staying up to code, making sure that they're the cleanliest out of all the Chipotles in their area. Food quality. So they slow cook the meat in a facility and inside this sealed bag, and then they ship it to whatever store it's going to, and then there, the day of, they'll cook the meat, they'll finish seasoning, doing all the necessary prep things that they need to do. They also invest in their local farmers. They give them proper resource, money, in order to make sure that the food quality is top-notch, make sure that they're not putting any GMOs or any steroids or anything like that. The food gets stored in specific containers, everything's labeled properly, everything gets sealed properly, everything gets timed, and everything should be documented from the moment that it leaves the farm to when it goes into the truck and then when it gets unloaded into the store. Hygiene. So there's wellness checks, and at the beginning of every shift, everyone has to wear a mask. Every hour, everybody has to make sure that they're washing their hands. They have a timer on every store to make sure that everyone knows when it's time to wash their hands.
This is a video on food safety.
All right, so supply chain problems at Chipotle. What is supply chain? Supply chain, in its simplest terms, is the sequence of processes in the production and distribution of a product. Chipotle's supply chain consists of getting materials like food and plasticware to Chipotle locations in a timely fashion to keep up with their market's demand. And then you can see here what makes supply chain so difficult. Weather, for example, cold ice storms can delay boats or trucks getting to their destination in a timely fashion. Economic cycles, pricing fluctuations, labor strikes is a huge one right now because no one wants to work. We got war, terrorism, and policy changes, government stimulus. With the government stimulus, people are getting checks and they're wanting to spend that money. So the supply of Chipotle's food is in high demand.
All right, so basically for our group, we're dividing the supply chain issues into two different categories. And those categories, as you can see on the screen, are going to be food supply shortage. Not only for Chipotle, but for a lot of other companies, they're having problems sourcing the food to their restaurants, which is causing a lot of other problems, which I'm going to get into later. But the main thing is, like I said, they're out of key ingredients. And actually, this is a picture. I don't know if you guys can see it that well, but it says, "Attention, not serving burritos or soft tacos. We apologize for the inconvenience." And that really is a management problem because with that, there's going to be issues that come off of that. And the other one is plasticware supply shortage. After doing some research, I saw that they're out of stuff like lids for the burrito bowls, and they're using foil, it works, but it's kind of inconvenient. And this is someone on social media that was saying that like the bowl lid shortage, and they were just complaining about it. And then this right here is just as a result of what I just talked about. Stores are closing early because they're out of stuff, and if they're out of stuff, they can't keep it open because that's just wasting time. If they're not selling stuff, or if they don't have stuff, they can't sell stuff. And attaching this to stuff that we learned in class, it's going to make customers unhappy. It's going to force management to make unprogrammed decisions when like customers come in angry that they don't have something or like a bowl or whatever. And how to fix it. Next slide. We came up with 4 different things, and the 4 different things include, you don't want to, for any company, I mean this goes true for any company, you don't want to have just one supplier. You don't want to supply out just one thing. You want to have different like suppliers so they come from different areas. So yeah, have multiple suppliers. And this is another thing we came up with. If there's tight demand on one food product, so like let's say for example meat, you might want to give a discount to stuff like chicken if you have more of it, so you could preserve the meat. Another one would be, okay, so cups and lids are not a core product. So let's say that the lids that they have say Chipotle on it. I mean, it really doesn't matter to customers if they're just a lid that doesn't say Chipotle on it. So you could, compromise and have different lids that aren't attached with Chipotle, but they still get the job done. And I also said that likely no one will be offended. And then last, you just gotta do a better job forecasting demand. And now let's go to the implementation.
So to implement what Stephen just went off of, to have multiple suppliers for meat, for plasticware, whatever, the best way to do that we found would be to outsource or insource depending on what would be better. So that would also include local or international, because if plastic is made across the ocean, then you will need a lot of suppliers over there. But if meat is made in the U.S., then having suppliers locally would definitely help benefit. And then to piggyback what Steven said about to discount the products that are in mass supply, and it would be to discount those products and see if the supply for those or the demand for those goes up, and then if it doesn't work out quite as well, to inflate the prices of the items where you have a short supply to deteriorate customers even further from ordering that food. And then to forecast the future better, now having gone through a pandemic like COVID where the world really hasn't seen anything like it, having this in the rearview mirror and just knowing what could happen would help just have a plan together for if this ever does happen again, you have some sort of background knowledge on how to do it. But even going further, just being able to see how the demand and how the supply varied and fluctuated through the pandemic will help determine what people actually like and what people actually want compared to just normal everyday activities. And then with the generic cups and lids and all that, it would be a good alternative, but to implement that, just using generic and then having customer surveys and feedback go with that. And then if they don't mind it, even going to a green lid, so like a paper straw or like a paper cup or something like that would help with the supply and the demand just not be so crazy. And then lastly, tracking the supply chain. It would really just be looking at the numbers to see if the discounts and the spikes of the prices actually help the demand of the items. And then to ask customers to fill out surveys, as I already said, to see if the generic cups and lids actually matter. And if they don't, you could even use the green alternatives, because that not only would help the supply and demand of plasticware, but would also be green, and customers would like to go green to save the earth. And then to benchmark competitors and to stay on top of what they are doing, because if they do something and it works, then why not Chipotle use that same thing? And that's our presentation. We're Group 4.